Are you ready, Ethan?
The silver watch on my wrist ticked with a cold, rhythmic precision that matched the beating of my heart. It was 8:15 p.m. Outside the grand mahogany doors of the Sterling Gala, the city of Chicago hummed with its usual indifferent energy, but inside this hallway, the air felt heavy, almost liquid. I looked at the woman standing next to me. Victoria Caldwell was breathtaking in a floor-length emerald silk dress that shimmered like a warning sign under the dim corridor lights. She wasn't my wife. She was the wife of the man who had spent the last 8 months destroying my life in the dark. Her hand, gloved in lace, trembled slightly as she reached up to adjust my tie. Our eyes met in the gilded mirror. Two strangers bound together by a betrayal so deep it had redefined who we were. "Are you ready, Ethan?" she whispered, her voice a fragile thread of silk. I didn't answer with words. I simply placed my hand over hers, feeling the cold metal of her wedding ring press against my palm. Tonight wasn't about a party. It wasn't about the music or the champagne. It was about the moment the lights finally came up on a stage built of lies. Before we continue, I'll be so happy if you subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. 10 years. That's how long I had shared a bed with Natalie. 10 years of morning coffees, shared jokes about the neighbors, and plans for a future that sat on the horizon like a sunrise we were guaranteed to reach. I am a man of details, a structural engineer by trade. I understand how things hold weight. I understand stress points and foundations. I thought our foundation was made of reinforced concrete. I thought the small silences between us were just the natural settling of a long-term relationship. But I was wrong. The cracks didn't start with a bang. They started with a smell. A scent of expensive, masculine cologne that lingered on Natalie's coat. A scent that wasn't mine. Then came the late-night office emergencies, and the way she started sleeping with her phone tucked under her pillow, like a soldier guarding a weapon. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that a decade of loyalty earned her the benefit of the doubt. But the doubt eventually turned into a dull ache in my chest that wouldn't go away, no matter how many times she kissed me and told me she loved me. The day my world collapsed was a Tuesday. It was raining, one of those gray, soaking rains that makes everything feel muted. Natalie had left her laptop open on the kitchen island while she jumped in the shower. A notification popped up. No name, just a string of numbers. But the message was a jagged blade. Sweet 512. Don't be late this time. I've missed you. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and hollowed out. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I just sat there in the silence of our kitchen, listening to the sound of the water running upstairs, watching the steam rise from my untouched coffee. I looked at our wedding photo on the wall. We looked so young, so certain. In that one moment, 10 years of memories turned into ash. I realized that while I was building our life, she was dismantling it, brick by brick, for a man who went by a string of numbers. I realized then that the person I had shared my life with was a stranger wearing my wife's face. I didn't confront her that night. My engineer's mind took over. If a building is failing, you don't just kick a wall. You map the damage. I spent the next 3 weeks in a trance of calculated observation. I learned how to track a phone without being seen. I learned how to read the tension in her shoulders when she lied. And eventually I followed her. I followed her to a high-end bistro downtown, tucked away in an alleyway where the rich go to hide. I sat in my car, 3 blocks away, watching through binoculars as she stepped out of a black Mercedes. The man who opened the door for her was Ryan Caldwell. I knew him. Everyone in the city knew him. He was a real estate mogul, a family man, who appeared on billboards promising a better future for the community. Seeing him press a hand to the small of Natalie's back felt like a physical blow to my stomach. It wasn't just an affair. It was a cliché. My wife was a hobby for a man who already had everything. But Ryan Caldwell didn't have everything. He had a wife of his own, Victoria. I saw her photos in the social columns. She was always 2 steps behind him, smiling the practiced smile of a woman who knew her role. I wondered if she knew. I wondered if she sat in her mansion at night, smelling the same foreign scents and hearing the same hollow excuses I did. The thought took root in my mind like a weed. I didn't want to just hurt Natalie. I wanted the truth to be the only thing left standing. I found Victoria's contact through a mutual business associate under the guise of a charity project. When we met at a quiet park far from the city center, she looked even more fragile than she did in the papers. We sat on a bench, the sound of children playing in the distance providing a haunting contrast to the conversation we were about to have. I didn't ease into it. Couldn't. I looked at her and said, "Victoria, my name is Ethan Cole. My wife is Natalie. And I think she's spending a lot of time with your husband." The silence that followed was long and agonizing. A leaf fell from a nearby oak tree, spiraling down to land on her lap. She didn't look at me. She didn't even blink. She just stared at that leaf for what felt like an eternity. Then her shoulders slumped, and a long, jagged breath escaped her lips. "Suite 512, she whispered. My heart stopped. She knew the room number. She had found the same breadcrumbs I had. She looked at me then, and I saw a reflection of my own soul in her eyes. The same exhaustion, the same quiet dignity struggling against a tide of humiliation. "I thought I was crazy," she said, her voice cracking. "I told myself I was imagining the way he looked at his watch when he was with me. I told myself he was just stressed with work." We sat there for 2 hours, 2 people whose lives had been gutted by the people they loved most. We didn't talk about revenge at first. We talked about the pain of being a second choice in your own home. If you're feeling the weight of this story, please hit the like button. It helps us bring more of these real, raw experiences to light. As the sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows across the grass, the tone of our conversation shifted. Victoria wanted to leave him quietly. She wanted to take her dignity and disappear. But I knew Ryan Caldwell. A man like that thrives on quiet exits. He would spin the story, make her look like the unstable one, and keep Natalie as his trophy on the side. "No," I told her, my voice turning cold. "They've had their time in the dark. They've enjoyed the secrets. I think it's time we give them exactly what they want, an audience." I told her about the Sterling Gala. It was the biggest event of the year, and Ryan was the guest of honor. Natalie had already bought a new dress for it, telling me she was going with the girls from the office. I looked at Victoria and held out my hand. "Don't go as his wife who stays in the background. Go as my date. Let them see us together. Let them wonder how much we know until the wondering breaks them." The preparation for the gala was a military operation. I acted the part of the doting husband, complimenting Natalie on her dress, listening to her lies about her work friends, with a smile that felt like a mask glued to my skin. Every time she touched me, I felt a jolt of revulsion, but I channeled it into focus. I met Victoria in secret 3 more times. We coordinated everything. We didn't want a scene, we wanted a presence. We wanted to be the physical manifestation of their guilt. On the night of the event, I dropped Natalie off at a friend's house, watching her walk to the door, knowing she would sneak out the back to meet Ryan 10 minutes later. Then, I drove to the hotel where Victoria was waiting. When she stepped out of the elevator, she looked like a queen going to war. We didn't speak as we drove to the ballroom. The tension was a living thing in the car, vibrating between us. Walking into that ballroom was like stepping into a furnace. The heat of 1,000 lights, the roar of 100 conversations, and the clinking of crystal. We waited near the entrance, tucked behind a marble pillar, watching the crowd. And then we saw them, Ryan and Natalie. They weren't hiding anymore. In this room of friends, they felt safe. They were standing near the bar, laughing, his hand resting familiarly on her waist. Natalie looked radiant. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. It was a knife to the heart, seeing the woman I loved give my joy to another man. Victoria saw them too. I felt her hand tighten on my arm, her nails digging into the fabric of my suit. "Look at them," she whispered. "They look so happy, like we don't even exist." I leaned in close to her ear. "They're about to remember we do. Just stay calm. Don't let them see you bleed." We began our walk across the floor. It felt like the room went silent in waves as we passed. People recognized Victoria, then they recognized me, then they looked at Ryan and Natalie, and the math began to happen in their heads. The whispers started as a low hiss, like steam escaping a pipe. We moved slowly, deliberately. We weren't rushing. We wanted every eye in that room to be a witness. Natalie saw us first. I watched the laughter die on her lips, replaced by a look of such pure, unadulterated terror that for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Her glass of champagne tilted in her hand, the liquid spilling over the rim and onto her expensive dress. But she didn't even notice. She just stared at me, then at Victoria, then back at me. Ryan turned a second later, his confident smirk freezing into a mask of stone. The trap had snapped shut, and the whole world was watching. I stepped forward, leaving Victoria's side for just a moment to stand directly in front of my wife. The man next to her, the mogul, looked like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't swing a fist. I reached out and gently took the trembling glass from Natalie's hand and set it on a passing waiter's tray. "You forgot your wrap at home, Natalie?" I said, my voice smooth and terrifyingly calm. "I thought I'd bring it to you, and I ran into an old friend on the way." I stepped back and gestured to Victoria. The silence in the ballroom was now absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Victoria walked up to Ryan, looked him dead in the eye, and didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The way she looked at him, with a mixture of pity and absolute finality, was more devastating than any scream. What do you think was going through Natalie's mind at that moment? Was it regret or just the fear of being caught? Let me know in the comments below. But the night was far from over. I hadn't just come to show up. I had one more detail, one more stress point to trigger. I looked around the room, making eye contact with the photographers who were already snapping pictures of the four of us. This wasn't just a private heartbreak anymore. It was public record. I leaned in toward Ryan, close enough to smell that damn cologne. "I've spent 10 years building things, Ryan," I whispered so only he could hear. "I know exactly how much pressure a structure can take before it collapses. You've reached the limit." I turned back to the room, raised my hand to get the attention of the band leader, and asked for a specific song. A slow, mournful cello piece that Natalie and I had danced to at our wedding. As the music began to play, I didn't look at her. I turned to Victoria and offered my hand. "May I have this dance?" We danced in the center of the floor, two ghosts moving through a graveyard of memories. Natalie and Ryan stood frozen, two statues of guilt, as the crowd began to circle around us. They were trapped. To leave would be an admission of cowardice. To stay was an endurance of agony. Every turn we took, I saw Natalie's eyes following me. Filled with tears she didn't dare let fall. She wanted me to save her. She wanted me to cause a scene so she could play the victim. but I gave her nothing but the rhythm of the dance. I realized in that moment that revenge wasn't about the fire. It was about the cold that follows. I felt Victoria's head lean against my shoulder, a genuine moment of shared exhaustion. We had done it. We had dragged the truth into the light. But as the song ended, I realized that the hardest part was yet to come. The truth was out. But what were we supposed to do with the wreckage? The cello faded into a haunting silence, leaving only the sound of 100 held breaths. Victoria and I stood in the center of the ballroom, our hands still joined, a picture of absolute, terrifying composure. I could feel the heat radiating off the crowd, the voyeuristic hunger of 100 socialites who had just witnessed the social execution of the city's golden couple. Natalie was trembling so violently now that the sequins on her dress caught the light in jagged, frantic patterns. She took a step toward me, her mouth opening to speak, but no sound came out. She looked like a child lost in a storm, reaching for a hand she had already bitten. I didn't move. I didn't offer her the comfort she had spent a decade taking for granted. Beside her, Ryan Caldwell had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His empire was built on a reputation of steel and family values, and I had just turned it into a house of cards in front of his biggest investors. "Ethan, please," Natalie finally managed to whisper. Her voice was thin, reeking of a desperation that made my skin crawl. "Let's just go. We can talk about this. This isn't who we are." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the burning ache of betrayal. I felt a strange, cold clarity. "No, Natalie," I said, my voice carrying just enough to ensure the surrounding circle heard every syllable. "This is exactly who you are." I just stopped pretending I couldn't see it. I turned to Victoria, who was staring at Ryan with a calm that was far more lethal than rage. She reached into her small silk clutch, pulled out a single silver key, and stepped toward her husband. She didn't throw it. She didn't scream. She reached out and tucked it into his breast pocket, patting it gently. "The locks were changed an hour ago, Ryan," she said softly. "Your things are at the hotel. Suite 512. I figured you already knew the way." The collective gasp from the room was like a physical gust of wind. The irony was a serrated edge, and Victoria had just twisted it. Ryan's face went from white to a deep, bruised purple. He looked at the key in his pocket as if it were a live grenade. He had lost his home, his wife, and his dignity in a single sentence. I watched him realize that the safe world he had built, the world where he could have his wife's status and my wife's devotion, was gone. He was no longer the hunter. He was the prey. He looked around the room, searching for a friendly face, but everyone was looking away, suddenly very interested in their champagne or the molding on the ceiling. In the world of the elite, scandal is a contagious disease, and Ryan Caldwell was now patient zero. Before we move into the final, life-changing twist, I'd love to know, do you think Victoria's move with the key was too cold? Or was it exactly what he deserved? Drop a Team Victoria or Team Ethan in the comments. We read every single one. Natalie tried to grab my arm as I turned to leave, her fingers digging into the wool of my tuxedo. "You can't do this to me, Ethan. 10 years. We have a life." I stopped and looked down at her hand until she slowly let go. "We had a life, Natalie," I said, my voice dropping to a low, steady rhythm. "But you traded it for a room number. I'm just finalizing the transaction." I didn't wait for her response. I turned my back on her, on the tears, the lies, and the decade of memories that now felt like a lead weight. Victoria took my arm, and together, we walked through the crowd. People parted for us like the Red Sea. We walked out of the ballroom, past the marble pillars, and out into the cool, biting night air of Chicago. We stood on the sidewalk for a long time, watching the valet bring around the cars. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was light. It was the silence of two people who had just survived a shipwreck and reached the shore. "What now?" Victoria asked, her breath hitching in the cold. She looked at the city skyline, the lights of the buildings reflecting in her eyes. "Now," I said, looking at the wedding ring on my finger before slowly sliding it off and dropping it into a nearby trash bin. "We stop living for people who only saw us as shadows. We go home. Not to the houses they're in, but to ourselves." She nodded, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through her exhaustion. We didn't exchange phone numbers. We didn't make plans to meet. We were bound by a moment, but we didn't need to be bound by the pain anymore. 6 months later, I was sitting in a small, sun-drenched apartment in a part of the city Natalie had always hated because it was too quiet. I was surrounded by boxes, but for the first time, they were filled with things I actually liked. No more expensive, minimalist furniture she chose to impress the neighbors. Just my books, my drawing table, and the smell of fresh coffee. The divorce had been swift. When you have photos of a man's wife on your arm at a gala while his own wife is in the arms of your spouse, the lawyers don't have much to argue about. Natalie had tried to explain that it was a moment of weakness that turned into a habit. But I never picked up. I didn't need an explanation. I had the truth, and the truth had set me free. I heard a knock on the door, the mailman. He handed me a thick envelope. It was the final decree, stamped and sealed. I should have felt sad, but it felt like a graduation. As I set the papers on the counter, a small clipping fell out of the back. It was from the business section of the morning paper. Caldwell Development's files for bankruptcy. Below it was a grainy photo of Ryan leaving a courthouse, looking haggard and defeated. Without Victoria's family connections and the reputation I had dismantled that night, his empire had folded like wet paper. I felt a flicker of something, not joy, but a somber sense of balance. He had sought to take everything from me, and in the end, he was the one left with nothing. If you're still here, it means this story resonated with you. Hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. We're building a community of people who value the truth over the lie. But the real twist, the thing that changed everything, didn't come from a courtroom or a newspaper. Came from a memory. A few weeks after the gala, I had gone back to that quiet park where I first met Victoria. I sat on the same bench, watching the same trees. A woman was sitting a few benches down, reading a book to a young girl. The girl laughed, a bright, pure sound that pierced through my lingering gloom. I realized then that for 10 years, I had been so focused on building a perfect structure with Natalie that I had forgotten to actually live inside it. I had been an engineer of a marriage, but I had never been a resident of a home. The revenge wasn't the party. The revenge wasn't the bankruptcy. The real revenge was my own happiness. I started drawing again, not blueprints for skyscrapers, but sketches of people in the park, of the way the light hit the river at noon. I started traveling to places Natalie had called boring. I realized that by trying to ruin me, she had actually forced me to find the man I was before I met her. I was no longer the victim of a betrayal. I was the architect of a new life. And that life was beautiful because it was honest. Every morning when I wake up, I don't check for foreign scents or hidden messages. I just breathe. There's a moral in this wreckage, though it's not one you'll find in a fairy tale. Loyalty is a choice you make every single day, and the moment someone stops choosing you, they lose the right to your heart. You cannot fix a foundation that was built on a lie, no matter how much work you put into it. Sometimes, the most move you can make is to let the whole thing fall down so you can see the sky again. Ethan Cole didn't just lose a wife that night. He lost a ghost. And in the silence that followed, he finally heard his own voice. So I have to ask you, as we close this story, if you found that message on the laptop today, would you have the courage to walk away? Or would you try to fix something that's already broken? Is revenge ever really worth it? Or is the best revenge simply living well? Share your stories in the comments. We're all learning how to build something better, one truth at a time. And if you want to hear more stories of resilience and justice, click the video on your screen right now. You won't want to miss what happens next.